Huh. Interesting. Wow, all our people are in like the same bracket.
Yeah, a lot of them are, unfortunately.
Yeah, and they're a little bit less than I was expecting. Still 8, that's pretty good. But
8 is a lot, but yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them are in the same bracket.
yeah, and then it's what Miles, Garrick, and
Nick.
Nick. Yeah, that's what I
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah. There's a lot of clumping. There's several like Italian matchups.
French. That's
All the
a whole
French guys are
bracket of
friends with
French
each other.
people.
Yeah. There's the French quarter down at the bottom.
Okay, it's one thing that's already notable about this competition is that there are no buys directly to this to 32, given that in Paris they knew 2 people had COVID and were not coming to the competition,
Ah,
but they left them in the tableau because they basically were just like, oh, like this is the protocol we were told.
yeah.
And then so like Saito and I think Lavador were the 2 people who ended up getting buys to the 32, even
Got
though they
it.
squeaked by in pools.
Yeah.
Granted, they're very strong fencers, and you would expect them to go so as far, but
Hmm.
um, it was just feels like a a mistake by the organizers in that respect. I'm glad that they remedied that with whoever took my spot.
Yeah, for sure. So going from the top down, do you see any interesting matchups?
I mean, the first one, I think we should touch on basically all the American matchups here. It's
Works for
gonna,
me.
because obviously that's what a lot of the listeners in the States are most interested in.
For sure.
Um, and going from the very top, I think that the bout between Chung and Zhang is going to be a difficult one for Daniel because a lot of what Daniel does well is moving around a lot and then getting the person to miss and kind of exposing his shoulder and back a lot to kind of draw them in, to bait them in. But Kat Long is so strong at flicking and he's so much taller and he'll be able to manipulate the distance in a way that's, going to be a lot harder for Daniel to do what he does well. Um, so, obviously you never know what with fencing, and
Right.
that's one of the
It's the
beautiful
cool
things
thing
about
about it.
fencing. But as far as a matchup on paper goes, that one seems pretty
Tough.
difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I saw this matchup, I remember you telling me about when you fenced him at the last neck, where I think you said something like, I used up my flicking quota for like the whole year in that bout or something. And the
Yeah.
times when I do see him get beaten pretty soundly are when people are very comfortable and consistent flicking. And this is a person who's obviously very comfortable and very consistent with his flicks. So I think that will
Yeah.
be very tough as well.
Yeah. And also, Chung being left-handed adds another dimension to the mix. He actually gets 2 targets he can flick to a lot pretty easily, both
The
the
back and
chest
the
and the
chest.
shoulder.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, um, I'm excited to see how Daniel's able to navigate that. Um, but I do know that, this does not play particularly well into his strengths.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well.
The next matchup, Ashton and Milnikov. Milnikov is a young fencer. Obviously, I actually fenced him in the last team event where he beat me 5-4 in the first round of the semifinal. Obviously, we ended up taking the rest of the bout pretty handedly. And he's a strong fencer. I think Ashton, his strengths come from using his length and his height, but can sometimes fall into traps when the opposing fencer is very quick on their feet. And that's something, you know, I think this one will be won by whoever is able to control the distance and control the pace of the bout better. If Ashton's able to go out there and assert what he wants to do, there's definitely a strong possibility that he can put Milnikov on the back foot. And then because he's the one dictating the tempo and the distance, Milnikov can't like get wound up and start attacking very quickly, which is where Ashton has trouble sometimes because
That's interesting.
he's not as quick as some of the other fencers out there. So if you accelerate really quickly, he starts backpedaling and sweeping because he's not stable on his feet. But you know, one of the things that I find when fencing Milnikov is that you can still really push him with the attack. That's where I was most successful at the Olympics. That's where Garrick was most successful in the team event,
Mhm.
and we generally did very well against him in the team event in Tokyo. So if you can push him straight off the line and you're the one who's being the aggressor and the person, you know, dictating the flow, as I've said, then I think he has a chance in this bout.
Cool. I've also, from what I've seen, Milnikov seems less consistent than the other young Russians. Would you agree with that also?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's really fully hit his stride. The two Borodishevs had a lot of success in the juniors, and so did Milnikov to a certain degree,
Yeah.
but it was always overshadowed by the two Borodishevs. And the two Borodishevs are extremely strong fencers, so
Yes, they
there's
are.
a it's a tough task. But I don't think Milnikov has hit the same level as the either of the Borodishevs just yet, and he's out here trying to make a name for himself. So we'll
For sure.
see. This is a very interesting bout between two young fencers trying to kind of break into the scene, so to speak.
That's a good way to think about that. And then the next one, young Chase already having a very good tournament. He finished first out of pools with, I think, only 9 touches against him, which is pretty crazy. I don't know this Polish fencer, Wojtkowiak, but
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know him either. I Yeah, honestly, I think he must be one of the younger fencers because I have it's he's not been one of the Polish that's been around the block for a
mhm,
while.
yeah,
I imagine that Chase will take this one reasonably handedly. Chase is fencing super well right now on the
yes, he
senior
is.
circuit, obviously, given what he was able to do in Paris, and then being able to replicate that to a certain degree here by going 6-0 with 9 touches against in pools is a pretty impressive
It's a
feat in of
strong
itself.
statement.
Yeah, so I would not be surprised to see Chase take this one. And just the way Chase fences is really strong in general because he especially in the earlier bouts, I think he does a really good job of really, you know, taking advantage of the opponent's weaknesses, using his speed and his strength and converting a lot of counterattacks that people aren't expecting, and then a
Mhm.
lot of attack remises that people aren't expecting. I think that's really indicative for what those first bouts in the 64 kind like you can kind of abuse. You know, a lot of the more experienced fencers actually sometimes have trouble in the 64 because they're still trying to feel out what's going on. They didn't fence the day before in competition, um, and they try and take a little bit more methodical of an approach. Whereas sometimes you just got to go out there and just do what you want to do,
Yeah,
right?
show the other person that you're the top seed.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the way Chase fences is basically that. So um, it might have to change when he starts fence. He might have to be a little bit more methodical when he starts fencing like the higher level fencers. But as far as this first bout in 64, I wouldn't be surprised if he takes it pretty solidly.
I have a question about you said something about how he got third in Paris last time. How important do you think the confidence of like winning a medal in a previous tournament is? Do you think that that is like momentum that is really helpful for the next tournament, or just an indication that someone's already fencing well, or a combination of both? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a huge confidence booster. I think a lot of people when they hit that first medal, they're like, "Wow, I can do it. I can
I
go out
feel
there and
invincible right now, or something.
yeah." but that kind of works in both ways, because a lot of people get their first medal and then bomb out the next competition, you
Yeah.
know. Um, there are also other people who go out and get their first medal and then follow it up with great results. You know, a it's really difficult to say with different people, but it's about the mindset, right? And I think Chase is mentally really strong because he's not, even though he's excited he got his first medal on the senior circuit, he's really, obviously amped up about that. I don't think it's one of those situations where it gets to his head where he's like, okay, I'm going to expect this every time.
Yeah.
I think it's more of a, okay, I know I can do it. Let's see how I can get back there. This is just a wild guess on how I think he takes it, just because, just knowing him enough through our training camps and competing with him a little bit. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and I don't think it'll get to his head. And I think he knows that, getting a medal at the Senior World Cup is extremely difficult, and uh, in the odds of being able to replicate that result twice in a row is going to be difficult. But you can still follow that up with a very strong result, on without making a medal too. So I think he's up and ready to do that. I think he actually has a good chance at least breaking the 16 here.
That'd be cool. And
Yeah,
so speaking of that, in the next one, it's
Brandon
Yabador
Lee. Yeah,
versus Brandon Lee, and Brandon has also been fencing really well recently. Didn't he? Wasn't he up like by 4 touches or something on Garrick at one of the last knacks recently?
yeah. He did really well against Garrick. Um, to be fair, I think Garrick was a bit gassed at that point. Me and
Okay.
Garrick had a bit of a had a strong bout right before that. And I know when Garrick is fencing well, and that wasn't some of Garrick's best fencing. But that being said, to even go toe to toe with Garrick, even if he's fencing poorly,
Yeah,
is a very difficult
it's
task
hard to do.
in of itself. I can attest to that firsthand for as someone who's trained with him since I was a kid.
Yeah.
um, and Lavador, you know, I think is a very difficult matchup because he's a strong fencer. He actually won Cairo last time this event was held. He beat me extremely badly in the semifinals. But that being said, as I said, when you're in the top 16, there are some fencers that kind of need some time to like figure
Ramp
out the
up.
opponent, and especially against someone who's particularly new to the circuit, just like a lot of these American juniors are.
Hmm.
Brandon is very new to the circuit. Paris was his first international senior event, if he hadn't previously competed in like Anaheim before or something like that.
Right.
Um, so I think a lot of people don't really know who these fencers are, and they kind of need to get a feel for them. And I'm guessing Lavador will go out there and be like, I don't really know who this guy is. Maybe like the one tidbit he has is he fenced against Marcus in the 64 in Paris and did pretty well. So I expect Carlos to kind of take his time in the beginning to try and feel out the bout, and if he gets rolling, he'll start going for it. But I don't expect him to go too crazy right off the bat. And I think Brandon actually has a you know a reasonable shot if he can play it smart and kind of capitalize on touches while Carlos is still feeling it out. The biggest I think problem with like going into about trying to feel it out is that if the other opponent really is able to assert themselves and
During that period.
try and get you with attack and preparation, try and get you with these quick touches that you aren't ready for, because you're just trying to see what the opponent's doing, you can rack up a bit of a lead and then kind of ride that the rest of the bout.
Yeah, that hole can be
Um,
hard to dig yourself out of sometimes.
Yeah, especially if they're hitting you on touches where it's not really feeling the opponent out because they're hitting you with things like attack and preparation and stuff. Obviously, that's a part of a lot of people's games, but
When you say
oftentimes it's
feeling
because
someone
you're,
out, you mean like the quick touches that don't give you a lot of time to gather information about the other person? Is that what you mean when you say that?
when I say feel someone out, is about like what are the opponent's tendencies, like using your distance to manipulate, throwing out some false actions and stuff. Feel out, okay, does my opponent prefer taking 6? Do they prefer taking 4? Do they like to go to the shoulder? Do they like go to the chest? Do they like to go to the flank? Are they going to look for counterattack? Or they're more inclined to parry?
Pull.
All of these things are what I'm doing when I'm, sussing someone out. And
Yeah.
usually I'm, you know, but I'm a pretty tall fencer, and I have the luxury of, using my distance to kind of play and be like, okay, let's see what they do if I do this. Let's see what they do if I do this. And then once you're like, okay, these are like the general tendencies of the fencers, then I can go and like commit to bigger actions or more concrete actions as opposed to kind of playing, you know, the reaction game where I do something and then go around it to react and stuff.
Right.
Um, and so that's what I mean by trying to figuring out the other fencer and sussing them out. But as I said, that can come with the drawback of while you're doing that, you're not really committing to big actions or hard actions. And those are times where you can get caught in preparation. Those are times where they can dive in with a crazy counterattack or something like that, or they can just attack you off the line because you're not necessarily ready to fence right off the line at first bout in the 64 at 10 a.m. So um, yeah, I mean, I think if, as I said, if Brandon can take advantage of some of those opportunities, and then also just do what he's been doing and being you know deceptive, hard to hit, very on his point. He's really good at putting the point on for someone his age. I think he actually has a reasonable shot at this, but he's going to have to bring it right from the beginning because if he
Yes.
lets Lavdor get rolling, it's going to be really difficult.
Sure. All right. Do we want to talk about Chupanich and Imura?
I don't actually know Imura too much of as a fencer, so I don't know how
Okay.
much I can add to that one. He's got these new brackets. The last couple competitions have been very interesting because it's so many young fencers that for someone who was considered the youngest fencer around for the majority of his career, even though I'm only 27, it's it's a pretty humbling moment to see all these people that even I am not particularly familiar with. So um, I don't really know Imura too well. I do know the name, but it's going to be difficult for me to
Okay.
put my
Yeah, fair enough.
2 cents in.
So on paper, we think Chupanich should win that one.
Yeah, I do think Chupanich will take that one, especially after how he did last competition. I think he wants to redeem himself because he bowed out in the 64 pretty quickly in
Especially
Paris.
after coming off of a bronze medal at the Olympics.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Next one, Marcelo versus Kim.
Yeah, so Kim Dong-soo is someone who's actually been around for a while. The Korean team always changes pretty sporadically. They've even had people in the top 16 in the world that stop going to World Cups, whether it's for military service or more bizarrely because their national ranking is tanked because even though they're really good at the World Cup circuit, they're not very good at Korean national competitions.
Yeah.
Um, that so Kim Dong-soon's been on the circuit for a while, sporadically, and he's a strong fencer, obviously great footwork um and very active as a fencer. I think um Marcelo and him actually fence reasonably similar, not necessarily in the actions that they like in the way that they look when they
They're both
fence.
very scrappy.
Both can be very scrappy fencers. Marcelo is more liable to do some crazy stuff
He's like the
than
Jank King.
yeah. So you know, and that works in both his favor and against him. I think doing crazy stuff against a Korean fencer will potentially be dangerous because a lot of the Korean fencers are looking for those counterattacks and remises. And when you
And they're
go,
used to crazy stuff from other Koreans also, at least in saber.
yeah, in foil, they're a little bit more reserved in as far as their actions. They'll go crazy, but not like because they're making gigantic actions. It's because they'll do these really, really fast attacks from like really far away that you don't expect, and you're like, wow, that was crazy.
Like Lee or something.
Yeah, like Lee Kwang Hyun does extremely well, but
Yeah.
Marcelo's crazy is where he like pulls his arm back and take these massive circles and stuff. And if you step into him there, that can be very hard to hit. And he's like jumping up in midair. And so I think if he's able to rein in a little bit of that wild side of a bit while still maintaining his aggression and all of that craziness that actually makes him a strong fencer, he can come away with this one. He just has to be careful, and also just not. He has got to be careful not to counterattack too quickly because, as unlike some of the other fencers out there on the circuit, the Koreans are very good at just doing very simple, direct, like double advanced lunge. And if you counterattack on that, unless they're going way too big, it's really hard because they're already shooting their arm out before.
They're not holding it all. Yeah.
Exactly. Like they're not reacting to your counterattack. Your counterattack is reacting to their attack. And so generally they're going to be the one that gets there first as opposed to you. Yeah.
Got it. So we think this one's kind of a toss up then.
I think it's a bit of a toss up, but I think Marcelo has a great opportunity to win.
He's also coming off of kind of a high. He made top 16 at in Paris.
Yeah, he made top 16 in Paris. Really strong bouts, and had a tough one with Marini, I think, where he made a bit of a comeback to come out and win. So, he's obviously fencing really strong. One thing about Marcelo is that he does not care who the other person on that strip is. You could be number 1 in the world. You could be number 64 on the bracket and barely make it in the second day. This man does not care. And this man it's even more showing when he talks about fencing sometimes. I remember there was one instance where we were like, oh, how'd you do in pools? He's like, oh yeah, I went like 5-1, but I lost to some idiot, or not some idiot, but he was like, oh, I lost to some scrub, this like really bad German guy. And we're like, oh, who? And he's like, I don't know. And we like pulled up his bracket and it was like Kleibrink. And we're like, you realize he's Olympic champion. And he was like, oh, really?
I should have beaten that guy.
Yeah, he had no idea that this guy was once Olympic champion, right?
That's funny.
So it just goes to show the mindset that Marcelo has.
Good mindset.
Yeah, he really does not care. And that's actually the biggest thing with young fencers is that if you go in scared against someone you think you're going to lose against, that already puts you in a losing mentality and puts you on the back foot. So especially for someone younger like Marcelo, you need that confidence to just go out there and be like, I don't care. Like, he might have done some crazy stuff, but I'm going to beat him today. Or like, I don't care who he is or don't even know who he is.
Anything else interesting happening in this bracket?
A lot of Koreans.
There are a lot of Koreans here.
I don't really know some of the Koreans in this bracket. I've seen Im around a couple times, but I do expect Choi to take that one pretty handedly. I think Birch and Chung could be a toss-up. Don't really know Chung too well, but I also don't know Birch particularly well either. I think that a lot of these bouts, when it's in like the 20s versus the 40s, those are two people that were probably about like difference in pools, and then one made it obviously directly into this table for the next day, and one person had to fight their way out. But I don't think the actual tableau placement really matters too much, like what their ranking matters too much, because they generally are of pretty similarly like leveled fencers. So I try not to take like the 24 versus 41 like rankings into with too much of a
Wait.
degree of
The way that I
certainty.
think about it is one person was fencing really well in pools yesterday, and the other person must have been fencing really well in DEs.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And they didn't even fence poorly in pools. I mean, they fenced
right,
like reasonably poorly, but it's not like they went like 2-4.
right. Yeah, exactly. I completely agree with that. All right. So the top part of the yellow half, quarter of the bracket.
Yeah,
Anything interesting
so
happening here?
um honestly, if we can go back actually up a
Oh,
little
sure.
bit, there's something I forgot to mention. Um, up a little bit again. I do see Chase having a potentially good route to the 16 because he actually beat Lavador pretty handedly in in Paris. Granted, with the top fencers, it's really hard to beat someone twice in a row, especially if you are the underdog in this
Hmm.
situation, because we do not take kindly to being beaten in
Yeah, right.
64 or being by someone we think is younger or less experienced or not as strong as us. So
And you think about it a lot before that, like
yeah,
going into the next one, like what would I do against him next time?
exactly. What would I do differently? So I think Lavador will put up a stronger fight against Chase. But that being said, I do think Chase could definitely take it again if Carlos hasn't changed some of his fencing and his tactics. And you know, not everyone does, and not every and some people think that, oh, like I should do the same thing, but I just got to hit him this time. You
Yeah,
know, so I'm very interested to see how that bout shakes up, and what changes Carlos has in store if he's able to make it through Brandon.
got it. So you think Chung is probably pretty like
Yeah.
a pretty solid pick for top 16, and then we'll see what happens between Chase and Yabador.
You know what? I don't like betting against the American, but I I'll say let's reserve judgment for that one.
Okay, very
just
political.
because just because I
Yeah,
don't
makes
like
sense.
betting against my own teammates. But yeah, out of the other ones, I do think Chase will make it through, and then I think um yeah, the rest of I think Chung probably will make it through. I think Carlos will likely make it through, and I think it's a pretty big toss up between Daniel Ashton and
Milnikov.
Milnikov. But I do think there are ways that Brandon can come out there and do really well against Carlos right away. And I actually do think Daniel can come ahead with a pretty early lead in this bout because he's also relatively unknown in the senior world, right?
Hmm.
So, and the way he fences is extremely unique. Let's put it that way.
Okay,
And if you've never seen it before and never fenced against it before, you're definitely liable to mess up a good amount of times.
that's interesting.
Yeah. So like some Chung is someone who sometimes needs to feel it out, as I say. And if Daniel can hit him with a few really bizarre ones right off the bat, might put him, in a disadvantaged situation.
Got it. Okay, so then let's go down to the yellow part.
Yeah. First half of the bracket, I think it's pretty cut and dry here. Who are going to take these two bouts? I think Shikine and Ha will both take these bouts really handedly. Shikine is definitely someone who really needs to, who really feels themselves out for the first half of like basically every bout, regardless if it's the 64.
Yeah,
But I do think, I do think he's a strong enough fencer where he'll take this one. And same with Ha. He's also a really strong fencer in his own right.
think of
Um,
Shakine as kind of like having a similar style to Garotso in that he's like when he's pushing you forward, he just kind of wants to hold his arm back and like find a way to kind of slip the tip in. Would you agree with that
um,
or
I would say they're actually pretty different. They do both like to push with their arm back, right? But Grotto wants to hit you. Shikine wants to take your blade and look for second intention a lot. Like he's less concerned about actually hitting you, which can sometimes lead to like trouble for him because you can hit him in preparation if you know what parry he's trying to be taking. Um, I mean, if you look at the when Shikine is fencing best, it's not he's hitting you with these like crazy attacks. He's hitting you with these crazy counter time
Nine
actions
times. Got it.
where you're diving in there because you're like, oh, I have the distance to hit him in preparation, and he somehow grabs your blade like a millimeter away from your chest and flicks you on the back, right? Those are the actions that he's actually hitting you on more rather than like slipping his point in there somewhere.
I see. It's
Um,
interesting the distinction between like trying to hit versus like trying to almost be defensive while he's attacking.
yeah. And granted, he can still attack, but
Yeah.
I've had a lot more success defending against him by just like letting him finish than like trying to dive in there unless he's like way too close.
Makes sense. That's
Um,
interesting.
yeah. Ha, I mean, he's a pretty solid all around fencer just in general. He can kind of do a little bit of everything. Uh, but I think the Koreans sometimes like to take too many risks at very bad points of the bout, especially like 14-14 and stuff like that. Um, and we've definitely seen that before with him as well. So we'll see with I think their bout between Ha and Shikine will be really interesting. If Ha counterattacks too much, I think he'll get in a lot of trouble because Shikine is very good at picking up that counter time action to hit you. But if he's able to push the attack, I think you'll have a lot of success because Shikine definitely, even though he's good at hitting counterattacks, I would say defending is probably the weaker of his two directions.
So you think probably Ha would make the 16 in this bracket?
It's hard to say.
Maybe not probably, but like a slight edge.
I think it's a toss up. I don't know if I would give him a slight edge. I actually might give the slight edge to Shikine, but I do think it's a bit of a like 60-40 or 55-45 kind of
Okay.
situation.
Got it.
It's about I would be very interested to watch tomorrow if it
Me
gets
too.
there.
Yeah. What about the lower part of this?
Lower part of this, the Babard Toldo about seems very interesting. I have not watched Babard fence a lot because he hasn't been on, a lot of World Cups. But the two times he's fenced in Paris, he's surprised a lot of people and like upset at least one person in the 16. So if I'm thinking about the right person, so if Toldo is not ready, I definitely can see that as an upset. You know, I think that it's even though there are things that Toldo does well. I I remember last time I was in Frascati, he had not been back there yet, and that's generally his home base for training. So I don't know how long he's been there. I would definitely look at this one as something as a potential upset, but yeah. So this one definitely has my eye in the 64.
Okay.
And Gardrola and Kook or don't really know how to
I'm not
pronounce
that
that.
either.
I think I don't know much about the Serbian fencer. I do think that Ingardjola is a pretty strong fencer in his own right. I think that he, it's hard to say considering I don't really know the other fencer, but I wouldn't be surprised if Ingardjola took this one pretty handedly.
Okay. Next one. Well, this is an interesting bracket.
Yeah. I think, yeah, wow. I think the most interesting bout out of all this one is going to be Chastney and Heo.
Yep.
Yeah. I still think Heo will take this one. He's got a lot more experience. He's, a veteran on the circuit. I don't think he's going to be set off too much about with all the crazy stuff that Chastney does when he fences. So Heo's fenced me enough times to kind of deal with that attack too. So I would probably give the advantage to Heo here. The other bouts, I think Sirotkin will beat Suzumura. A reasonably close bout, but I think he pulls away at the end. I think Suzumura is a strong fencer, but he's very methodical and very easy to read. So he has a lot of tendencies that if you can figure them out, you can abuse them.
Exploit them well, yeah.
Yeah, and Sorokin has been fencing reasonably well in his own right. So I think, I think because he's still a younger fencer, he's not going to be able to take advantage of those tendencies as much as like say a top 16 fencer would be able to. But I do think, um, but I do think he pulls away with this one at, in the end. Saito and Young, I think that one's gonna be a crazy bout to watch because Young fences very, very crazily.
I was gonna say like a lunatic, but that also works.
Yeah. And Saito also has shown some lunatic tendencies.
Yeah, he's like a more technical lunatic, if you want
Yeah,
to say something like that.
and he does it a lot more calculated or less frequently, right? He's like in control, in position, and then he does some diving flesh crazy counterattack, right?
Calculated lunacy, I love it.
So I do think Saito takes this one, but it's going to be interesting to watch. And when there's enough crazy going on, you never know what's going to happen and who's going to miss. So I would definitely also watch this one just in case. So the craziness does not go Saito's way.
Yeah, that's a funny way to think about it.
Yeah. And then I think even though Machi had a or Maki had a
Maki,
very good bout, I mean good competition in Paris, making the 16, I
16
believe.
also, yep.
I think that Grozzo takes this one. Grozzo's is too strong of a fencer.
He's
They're
so strong, he's so consistent too.
Yeah, and I think he's very consistent on the Italian national circuit as well. I don't think he has trouble with other Italian fencers too much. So I would give this one to Daniele.
Okay.
But I would say interesting rematch is Daniele and Heo, considering there's a lot of controversy in that bout in Paris as well. So if Heo and Grotto both make it through, that's a bout to watch because that's going to be a bit of a grudge match.
Okay, that's cool. This could be an interesting bracket as well. Wow,
Yeah,
this is really
yeah,
strong.
yeah. This is definitely one of the stronger brackets we've seen
Yeah,
so far. Garrick, I think will be able to beat Jurkovitz pretty handedly. I don't foresee him having too much trouble there. Bianchi Avila, now that's going to be probably the most interesting. This is literally a battle for the Italian team.
really.
Avila was not in Paris. He wasn't. I guess he wasn't ready to compete again.
Yeah,
And Cerrone has already made it clear that Bianchi and Marini are replacing Casara and Avila on the team, at least for the beginning of the season, to see how they do. They won the first World Cup in Paris, so I don't foresee
pretty
that
strong argument.
changing.
Yeah,
So I think this is going to be probably one of the more interesting bouts of the morning because Avila is fighting to show that he still belongs on the team, and he's going to want to show that he has a lot more to do individually as well.
Mhm.
And Bianchi's fighting to keep his spot on the team and
Right.
show that as a young fencer he deserves to be there. And he's not like a one-hit wonder where he got that one medal in Bonn and now like has nothing else to show for it. I think he's
Yeah.
going out there to try and prove himself. So I don't know who's going to take it. I haven't seen Avila fence since the Olympics because he wasn't in Paris, but this is about to keep your eye on for sure because both of them are going to be really fighting for their spot to try and prove that they deserve to be on that Italian team. Seiss and Mehdi Elise. Mehdi is a little bit crazy. I do think Seiss will take this one at the end. I think Seiss is the stronger fencer here. That being said, I think it'll be closer. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 15-11, 15-12, something like that, where Seiss is able to take it away at the end. He has a lot more experience and he's done better historically than Mehdi has in competition. And then the last bout, Rosatelli Borodashev. I think this is a very interesting bout. Obviously Borodashev riding pretty high, obvious breaking onto the circuit, younger fencer, but Rosatelli's actually pretty experienced and a very strong fencer. He's definitely upset some top 16 fencers before, and he's made a top 4 at a Grand Prix before as well. So
Oh, nice.
I, you know, he's definitely someone to keep your eye on. This is a bout that's one of the stronger bouts of the morning, especially for someone who's against someone who's in the 16.
Yeah.
That's he's like someone I know that if I saw him in the 64, I'd be like, oh my gosh, why did this guy do so poorly in pools? So yeah, I would say that that's definitely about to keep your eye on.
And Kirill was the one who almost got a medal at the Olympics but lost to Chung, right?
Yeah, the lefty.
Yeah, okay. Got it. And the next one. Okay.
Yeah,
This is
so
strong too.
yeah, I think that this first bout here, Hamza fencing reasonably well. I do think that he has some definite parts of his game he needs to work on. And Felipe is actually not a bad fencer. He's very strong and he's a little bit crazy.
Yeah.
And crazy in the morning in the 64 can always is always
Can always
liable
be a
for some.
problem.
Yeah, it can always be a problem. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is also on my upset list potentially as well. I think he's gonna fight. As a younger Italian, that you have to fight like crazy to even get a chance to be on the Italian team
Yes.
if you want to
Yes,
be on the
exactly.
Italian team. And so I think any of these younger Italians are going to be fighting like crazy to try and upset whoever they can to make, to go as far as they can in the competition so they can at least put themselves on the radar to
Yes.
eventually be on the Italian team.
A quick note about that. In the
Mhm.
US, we do things strictly 100% by points, except for sometimes like the actual selection of the members of the team event. That can sometimes be more coach's choice. But in Italy, it's just completely coach's choice who goes to the World Cups at all. So if you are given a chance to go and you don't show something, you may not be sent again. So these guys, especially the young guys, are always almost like fighting for their lives when they are in this situation. So
Yeah,
which gives them a lot of drive.
exactly. And it's in their blood too. It's like ingrained in their blood, probably because of this whole system. So I wouldn't be surprised if Felipe went out there and potentially upset Hamza. So yeah, I think that's about to keep your eye on. Miles, I think he has been like a bit of a roller coaster the
Yes.
past couple of years. And even, I think it's actually pronounced Jankowski, even though there's no J in there. He's been around for a while too. He's obviously younger than Miles. He's a very strong fencer, but very methodical. So I think, um, that either that sometimes works in Miles's favor and sometimes works against him. There are some tendencies, like glaring tendency Miles has that you can take advantage of sometimes, but he also has these crazy out of pocket actions that you won't ever expect.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready for them, he can definitely hit you on a lot of them. So I think that this is definitely about to watch. I think Miles definitely has a very strong chance at winning this bout, but it's just if Miles is able to build a head of steam or not. If he's not, I think Miles is very streaky. If he doesn't build that head of steam, he sometimes falls behind because he's like, oh, I'm not hitting these touches I think I should be hitting. But if he's able to build an early lead, an early head of steam, I wouldn't be surprised if Miles ran away with this one.
Okay.
Next bout, I think Luperi Di Tommaso. Di Tommaso is one of the younger guys. He's, as we've talked about before, he's going to be fighting for his spot to show that he deserves and why he should be the one that the Italians are sending to these competitions. Why he might be a part of the future of Italian fencing. Whereas Luperi, coming off a massive result in Paris,
Second
is
place.
fighting for his spot on the team. He wants to be on that team. He's had a pretty storied junior career, right? Junior world champion, cadet, um, cadet, not cadet world champion, but uh, youth Olympic champion. I mean, this kid has had a very, very strong junior career, but in the seniors never got a shot to be on the team because the Italians have been so strong. So in this transition period where you see less of Casara and Avila and more of the younger fencers being elevated to the squad, Luperi kind of in between there, right? He's not quite he's a year older than I am. He's turning 29 this year. Um, and he's never really had a shot to make the team. So I think if he's really chomping at the bit to show that, hey, if I can follow up Paris with another medal or in a top 8 or something, you need to choose me for the team. So I wouldn't be surprised if Luperi beats Di Tommaso here um, pretty handedly.
And this last one, I would hope that Itkin would be able to. He's just so consistent in like the early rounds, I feel.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he had a difficult bout in the 64 in Paris, but generally speaking, Nick has been extremely consistent in the early rounds, generally 64. Um, but Winterberg Paulson was someone who gave Nick a little bit of trouble in the team event um, last time around in Paris. Granted, team event's completely different animal, and Denmark was our first bout of the day, but um, I do know Nick is going to be thinking about that because he's going to want to be redeeming how he
Mhm.
fenced in the team event in that first bout against Winterberg Paulson. So don't I also wouldn't be surprised if Nick went out there and tried to set the tone right away to show that, hey, like, don't think you have a shot in this bout. So we'll see how it breaks down tomorrow.
So for this, not quadrant, but I guess octant, would you think that Nikita would be able to make it through here?
I think Nikita, yeah, I think Nikita would probably make it through here. I he I think he has a very strong like uh history against Hamza. Like in the team event, we fenced him against Egypt in Paris. He beat him 5-0 pretty easily.
Mhm.
So it I think the real difficult bout here would be Luperi. Um, it if he when he fences Luperi in the 32, but if he's able to make it through the 16, and if I guess the other one is if Miles makes it through. You never know with American versus American.
Yeah.
So I would be that would be uh, a a hard one to say.
Okay. And the last part of the brackets.
All right. First bout, Lafort, Archer. Archer, just started coming back to the senior circuit.
Yeah, I was gonna say he fenced in Notre Dame, right? But then I
Yeah, he
hadn't.
fenced at Notre Dame. He was on the junior team, a British team for a long
Yeah.
time. He's only a year or two younger than I am, so I definitely saw him around the junior circuit a lot. And he was a strong fencer in the juniors. So uh, if Lafort underestimates him as this first bout, I think it'll be difficult. But I do still expect Enzo to take this one. Um, a lot of what Christian likes to do is use his size and height to kind of abuse fencers, and you can't really do that against Lafort because he's so much taller than you.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that already is a benefit that Enzo has in this bout. And the next bout is a very strange one, Giacone and Martino. This one really is a toss up. Both fencers are Giacone's pretty like is a pretty strange fencer as far as his timing is concerned, but also very like he has a few things he does very well, and he has a lot of patterns to his game. But Martino is like the king of doing the same thing over and over again. So um, I wouldn't. I really have no idea who will win this bout between the two of them.
Didn't Minuto used to represent Italy as well?
Menudo used to represent Italy, and he was Italian. He was a junior world champion for Italy back in the day.
Is
But
junior world number one. I did not realize he won junior world
it
championships.
was junior world. Yeah, he won junior world championships, I believe. Um, if not, maybe it was cadet world championships. But he was a extremely strong junior and cadet fencer for the Italians way back in the day. That's back when Garrick was fencing on the cadet and junior circuit. So that's how I knew who Minuto was
Yeah.
and how he was doing. But never really got a shot in Italy because his game didn't translate to the seniors particularly well. And then so went on to represent Turkey, and since then has not seen, that kind of success. So um, really, I have no idea who's going to win this one.
Okay.
But I do think whoever makes it out of the first bout, if Enzo is able to beat Christian, he'll probably make it through the next one too,
Got it.
past the next one too. These next set, Borodishev, Idiri. Idiri is a strong, younger French fencer trying to get his big result. He actually, I believe, got third at this event last year. No, not
Yeah.
this event at Doha last year.
And
Um,
I think when he did, he beat Borodishev. I don't remember which one, which is what I'm looking up right now.
mm,
Well, they fence each other at some point. Nope, it was the other one, but he does have a winning record against him. So
yeah. All right. Well, those are all junior competitions, so it's
I think so. Yeah.
been a while. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's I wouldn't be surprised if that's buried in Brodashev's brain that he's lost this guy a couple times, for better or for worse, right? Sometimes that works in your favor because you're like, all right, this is the time I'm gonna beat them.
Yeah.
Or it's like, oh,
A mental
like
block sometimes almost
mental
depends on
block
the person.
sometimes. Yeah, so I'd be very interested to see who wins here. I think, um, you know, I think Brodashev's been able to actually have a lot more experience and a lot more opportunities to go further in competitions and fence on team events. But
Yeah.
I would not be surprised if Adiri was able to take this one.
And then the
Um,
last one in this bracket.
yeah, Abe and Abu Qasim. Abe is a shorter fencer, very, a little bit
Nimble.
strange. Yeah, nimble. Abu Qasim, taller, longer, left-handed. Metrics wise, you would expect Abu Qasim to win this, but without seeing Al Qasim at the last competition in Paris, it's hard to say, what kind of fencing shape he's in currently and how well he's fencing. So for me, this one's definitely one to keep your eye on because I'm not sure where exactly Abu Qasim is with his fencing, whereas I do know the Japanese are training super hard. They just brought in Lepeshu as one of the men's foil coaches now as
That's
well.
interesting.
Yeah, so and they've been training in Paris and France in general since the last World Cup in Paris because of lockdown situations in Japan. So I know they've been training strong. They've been fencing with a lot of other French fencers. Um, wouldn't be surprised if Abe was able to get the upset here, but um, it's all contingent on how well Abu Qasim is fencing.
Yeah, he's also a hometown hero, so he may be, the home. I don't know how much the home field advantage is worth in fencing, but
Yeah, well, I don't
it's
know
certainly a real thing in other sports. So
yeah, I don't know how well he's fenced in Cairo previously, so
fair
is
enough. Yeah.
also a important factor.
for sure. Maybe the pressure is like too much for certain people like that in this situation.
Hmm.
So you think more likely LaFour is going to come out of this bracket than
Anyone else?
necessarily
Yeah,
anyone else? Got it.
yeah,
And now we have the French Quarter.
yeah, yeah. uh, it's really hard for me to, you know, do this, but um, Pouty versus Roger. Um, this is not a Roger I am particularly uh familiar with. I
Yeah, it's the younger
fenced
brother.
yeah, I fenced the elder Roger before, but never this one. Honestly, I can't give you an analysis because I know he fences very differently than his older brother. So if I had to pick and choose, I'd pick Pouty just because I know him. I know he's a strong fencer, and I don't really, and I feel like he probably like mm, does well consistently well enough at French tournaments where he probably beats Roger more
Yeah.
likely than not, but hard to say. I think this next bout is extremely interesting. Matsuyama Sito.
I would
Sito,
pick
someone,
Cito personally, but
I mean, it's definitely, uh, it's a difficult one. So Sito obviously had a big run in Paris, made the top 8.
yeah.
Matsuyama actually beat me in Paris. That's the first time he's ever done that. So both of them fencing pretty well.
Hmm.
Um, I would not. Um, I'd be very careful though because I would not underestimate the importance of having Lepeshu in your corner or the French in your corner in general as the
Ah,
Japanese now, because both Franck Baudin is the main head coach of foil altogether, and Lepeshu's men's foil coach. And Lepeshu has seen this guy
a
for
million
a
times
while
probably.
now, right? They
Yeah.
train together, they fence together. He's watched this kid, like, grow up, so to speak.
That is an excellent point.
So I think Matsuyama will be very ready for Sito. Um, and them both being left-handed always adds a difference in the mix because you never know how a lefty's going to fence another lefty. Um, and yeah, so I think this one's a very much of a toss-up. Definitely someone about I'd be watching to see who wins. Um, definitely one of the more interesting bouts of the morning.
Yeah. And the last one, do you know Fabian Brown at all?
Well, I guess we should do Lozelle Marini
Oh, I missed
first.
that one. I totally missed that one.
Um, Also interesting one, a battle amongst giants.
Yeah.
Both of them are gigantic right-handers. Marini a little bit skinnier. Um,
He's
I'm
tall and lanky. So like he
tall
has the
and
long arms
lanky.
and is really tall.
Lozelle, I think, is also very lanky. He's just a lot stronger
Okay.
and a lot bulkier.
He
So
hides his
you
length
don't
under
see
his
it as
muscles.
much. Yeah, and granted, I think Marini is still lankier than him.
Yeah.
Um, the guy has no torso, no target to hit. Um, I do think Marini takes this one. Obviously, there are paths for success for Loisel as well. There are certain ways, especially because he's so tall, he can kind of negate some of Marini's reach a little bit.
Advantage, yeah.
Um, but I think Marini still has a more complete game and still way harder to hit than Loisel is. So I think Loisel will have a lot harder time hitting Marini than Marini will Loisel. And the fact that like the level of difficulty is already there ingrained in it, and both are kind of younger fencers, though Marini being even younger than Loisel is.
Hmm.
I would still tip the advantage in Marini's favor, but not by a
Not
whole lot.
significantly. Got it.
Yeah. And then Fabian Braun versus Facconi. Don't really know Fabian Braun is that well. I've seen him around a little bit, but I expect Facconi to take this one. Facconi is very liable to go 15-14 in the 64 almost always,
Yikes.
but he almost always pulls it out too, right? Like
That's interesting.
so I mean, I feel like if you did a statistical analysis of the amount of 15-14s or 15-13s Facconi does in the 64, you get like a massive sample for some reason. And then the amount of times he wins versus loses is going to be also staggering.
You don't
just
get to
because.
be number two in the world by losing most of your bouts in the first round. So
Yeah, but like the fact that he wins all of them 15-14 is
15-14, yeah,
or
that's
fifteen
funny.
thirteen. Yeah, do like within three, right? Like if you could run a statistical analysis on that, um, and put it in an algorithm to like shoot out like onto the FIE and then just like shoot out all those results, I wouldn't be surprised if it's like at like 80% win rate, but like also like a 70% chance that it goes within between 15-12 and 15-14.
That's crazy. So something
Um,
interesting that could happen if those last two predictions are right is I think Falcone actually has quite a difficult time against Marini.
he
Um,
could be. I don't think they've fenced internationally too much, but nationally, I'm sure they've run into each other a fair amount. And yeah, that wouldn't surprise me because one thing that Falcone sometimes struggles with is a lot of length.
height, yeah.
Um, and like hit it, and especially the way Marini uses his height, um, sometimes gets like I would not be shocked if that did well against Falcone because like one thing that like Chung does super well is like hold his lunge until like the very end and like hit you like when you think you're right out of distance and he hits you and he does that
Just
against
stretches and gets you
Falcone.
anyway.
He does that against Falcone a lot, and that's something Marini does extremely well
Yeah,
too. So um wouldn't like that doesn't shock me that he doesn't fence particularly well against Marini, or at least has trouble with Marini.
yeah. The only time I've seen them fence, I think it was at one of the American World Cups in the top four.
Mm,
When
yeah,
Marini, it was like 15-6 or 7 or something,
hmm
which
yeah,
is crazy.
I remember that in Anaheim.
Yeah,
Um,
Anaheim, that's right.
so yeah, definitely that's about to watch for if both of them win. But other than that, I do think if Facconi beats Marini, I think he'll go all the way and take on whoever is on the other side of that bracket. Take out whoever's on the other side of that bracket, whether it's Pouty, Matsuyama, Sito, and then
Hmm.
obviously moving forward, yeah, like the Abu Akasem and Enzo bracket. Um, and then, I think all the speculation is once you like, it's hard to speculate any further than this
Yeah, there's so many
because
toss ups.
so many toss ups. And then you also, people's fencing changes on the day of. So a lot of people, they like really grind to get to the 16 or the 8, right? Like where they've won like pretty some ugly bouts. Like I can say for my own experience, there have been days where like I grinded and I was not fencing well. And I was going 15-13, 15-14 against people I really should not have been going 15-13, 15-14 with. But you grind it out, you somehow win, and you pull yourself together, you get to the 16 and the 8, and then it's smooth sailing. And like you're like fencing against these, even stronger fencers, the top 16 fencers, but you're like killing them.
Yeah,
So you finally feel your stuff. And I that's why I think it's really hard to go any further than speculating who's going to be in the 16 because you never know who's going to flip that switch and turn it on.
that's interesting. Is there anything else you want to say about any part of the bracket or this tournament or anything?
No, I mean, I think we covered a lot of the big bouts very well. I wouldn't be surprised to see some Americans do very well here. I think both Nick and Garrick have really strong chances to do well, and I also think that I think that uh, Chase and Chase has a really good opportunity to do well here, at least make it as far as
The
fencing
16.
16 and fencing Chung.
Hmm.
Um, so we'll see. I wonder how Chung's gonna feel fencing every single American junior um, moving
Literally, it could
today.
be 3 Americans in a row if the bracket works out the right way.
Yeah, yeah. So and all of them, I think, with the
Juniors, yeah.
exception of Ashton being an actual junior fencer. um, so yeah, we'll see. I'm excited to see how this all plays out tomorrow. Um, but that being said, I guess to give you my top picks as to who I think can be successful tomorrow. I wouldn't be surprised if Chung does really well. He's riding a real hot streak, going from winning the most prestigious, the pinnacle of our event, to winning the most prestigious World Cup of our event. It's something everyone dreams of doing at one point in their lives, winning the CIP. So
Yeah.
to do those two things back to back, he's riding a real hot streak, and he's making it look like very, very solid.
Yeah.
He's fencing extremely well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him do well. Um, I wouldn't be surprised to see Garrick do well. I know he wants to redeem himself after last time around in Paris, and he has a reasonably good bracket to do it too. It's
Yeah.
all very difficult. I mean, like that second bout will be difficult, and even the moving on, whether
That
it's
will be difficult as
Rodashev,
well.
Rosatelli,
Yeah.
Seiss, I think it's still difficult, but all very doable as well. I don't think, any of those people on most days would beat Garrick. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him go far and then meet whoever's on the other side of that bracket. And I think Nick also has a really good shot at doing pretty well. I guess they would have to meet to go to the 4.
Yeah.
But
Unfortunately.
hey, that's fencing, right?
And
So
if you have 2 Americans fencing in the 8, that's still great. So
hey, you're guaranteeing yourself a medal. So I think both of them can do as far at least as the 8. Obviously, hopefully going for one of them going further
right.
past that. Out of here, I think Facconi honestly takes it to the 4. And then who else do I have to pick?
Didn't talk about this part.
We didn't talk about this bracket. Oh, this I think is the biggest toss-up bracket. I think
I
I
agree.
could definitely see Shikine taking it. I could also see Garotso taking it. Garotso on any given day, I think, is the stronger fencer, and I think he was the one who beat Shikine at the Olympics, if I'm not mistaken.
Don't remember. Let's look it up. Garotso beat Chikina, yep.
Yeah. So I think on any given day, Garotso is stronger. So I would probably lean towards Garotso, but you never know. Chikine's can have a perfect day where he's like everything's going,
Nothing's
or he can have
missing.
a
Yeah.
horrible day where like he's not feeling it at all. So I think I would still lean towards Garotso.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm sorry you're not there to have us watch you compete, but thank you
I
for
put myself up there too if I were there.
yeah. But thank you for your detailed analysis of all the matchups, and hopefully we can do something else tomorrow.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.